A few years ago, I went on a camping trip with some of my friends. We decided to go for a week and a half long hike on a trail in the mountains, and we had enough cars so we could park my friend's Jeep SUV at the end and take my truck to the beginning of the trail so we wouldn't have to walk back where we started. The trail went roughly in a U shape, so the beginning and the end weren't too far apart. It was during early summer, so we assumed the trails would be populated and safe. However, it wasn't long before weird stuff started happening. The first day went okay. We passed a group going the opposite way, and they seemed like they had a blast. We talked for a little bit and moved on, and shortly afterwards we took a lunch break. After eating, I went off the path about 40 feet to take a piss, and when I was done, I walked over to a tall boulder with the intention of looking at the trail ahead of us. On my way over there, I ended up running into a dead moose. At first I was startled, but then I took a closer look. It looked like it had been freshly killed, and the whole underbelly was torn open. However, there weren't any organs inside. I just assumed it had been killed and gutted by a hunter and he was going to come back and get it after disposing of the organs, so I left it there and went back to my friends. The rest of the day went relatively uneventful. We stopped in a clearing and set up our tents and got a fire started. We spent the rest of the night just goofing around and told scary stories until it was time to sleep. Most of the stories were pretty lame, but there were a few that spooked me a little, and the same for the rest of us. I knew it was all just bullshit, so I slept fine. When we awoke the next morning, it looked like some of our gear had been moved. Backpacks moved around, boots scattered around the tents, that kind of stuff. It was pretty weird, but we didn't think much of it and continued on. I guess we just assumed it was animals, or we had actually left it that way and forgot or something. During that day, we came across several more dead animals, like deer and foxes and stuff. They were all mutilated, like they had been ripped apart during death. We assumed it was just predators and didn't think much of it, even though we had never seen this many before. Shortly before we stopped again for camp, we came across a dead brown bear off the side of the trail. It had been mutilated like the others, and had all the meat on its legs stripped off the bones, and it looked like it was walking on stilts. This really freaked us out because there's not any animals I'm aware of that would fuck with a grizzly, let alone be able to kill it like that. On a previous hiking trip, we had a close encounter with one, and luckily were not attacked. From then on, we always carried guns with us when hiking. I always had my Ruger Blackhawk 44 Meg in a shoulder holster. As we were setting up camp about a quarter mile from the dead bear, a park of rangers on horseback rode by carrying rifles. They stopped and talked to us for a bit and suddenly got really curious when I mentioned the bear we came across and all the other dead animals. They asked if I could show them to it, which I did, and they were very interested in it. I left them there and went back to camp, and we did our usual ghost stories and shit before drifting off to sleep. When we awoke, there was more weird shit like the previous morning, and the same happened the next morning, along with seeing more animal carcasses. On the morning of the 5th day of the hike, the campsite was a mess of our shit scattered everywhere, and someone in the other tent noticed muddy handprints on the rain flap. We decided someone was stalking us and purposely fucking with our campsite in an effort to freak us out. We decided to keep calm and not let this person win, and we knew that if anything turned violent, we were all armed and we would be able to defend ourselves. We pressed onward, content to not let this ruin our trip. The next night, we decided to have people keep watch in 3-hour shifts. Nothing happened during my watch, and I wake the guy next for his shift. He brings his camera with him, because he said the flash would illuminate the area if someone was out there. It doesn't matter though, because he ended up falling asleep just before dawn. While eating breakfast, someone asked him why he was taking pictures last night. Confused, he checks the memory of his camera, only to find pictures of everybody sleeping, including himself. My friend is terrified right now, because we were, still, 40 miles from our car and would still have to sleep a few more nights, so he decides to keep quiet about the pictures. The next few days got considerably weirder. Our tents would get moved around during the night while we were asleep, and be in different areas of the site, and no one would wake up while it was happening. Whoever was on watch would fall asleep and would always be found still sleeping when the sun came up. One of the last days, we all woke up outside of our tents around the campsite. At this point, we were all scared shitless, and we were trying to get back as fast as possible. It was at this point my friend decided to tell everybody about the pictures, and to our horror, we see our sleeping bodies, some taken very close to our faces. The last one was of the friend who the camera belonged to's sleeping face. Only this time, it had a bone, white hand, cupping his chin. We estimated that we had 2 more days of hiking left, so we hurried our asses and tried to get out as fast as possible. We found a good spot to camp, hopefully for the last time. The next morning, we awoke on the ground, in a meadow away from our campsite. We lost a lot of time looking for our campsite, and when we got back, we found that most of our gear was shredded, including our tents. Someone miraculously managed to find the car keys, and we took our food that we had left hanging in a tree and continued on as fast as we could. Going as fast as we could, we got to the Jeep after it had gotten dark, and since we were all so tired, all 6 of us piled in the car, locked the doors, and fell asleep within minutes. The next morning, we were awakened by someone knocking on the window. It was a cop, and he was asking what we were doing in an enclosed area. As we were explaining ourselves, he said that the whole area had been closed due to abnormal animal activity, and all sorts of animal carcasses had been found mutilated, and they closed the area due to safety concerns. When asked why the police were handling this instead of the park rangers, the officer paused and looked away. The awkward silence was interrupted by my friend pointing out that there were about a dozen other cars in the parking lot, all with flat tires. We piled out of the van and saw that our own tires had been slashed. At this point, the cop comes clean and says that there's actually a manhunt in the area, but they are not sure what exactly they're dealing with. A lot of hikers had been going missing, and several had turned up dead during the last week. My friend then remembers the pictures on his camera and hands it to the cop. The cop's face suddenly goes blank and he hands back the camera. It's a photo that was taken inside the car the night before, partially visible in the last photo, which is my friend's sleeping face. Like some kind of party photo where the taker holds the camera at arm's length to get himself in, is the right half of a pure white face with black holes for eyes and a mouth full of sharpened animal, like teeth. I love camping. I always have. Back where I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, you would have to make a decent drive to find a good, secluded place to camp. That's the key to a successful trip, you know? You have to find a spot that's off on its own, away from the visitor center and all the first-time campers that tend to litter the sites with cans and wrappers. I am also an avid horror buff, and as such, I'm aware that secluded camping usually leads to slasher massacres or witch hauntings or goatmen attacks, at least in the stories and movies. Of course, they're just that, right? Stories and movies? But then, every one of those tales also stars a skeptic. I left Kentucky at the end of high school to attend college in Arkansas. You see, my mother had gone to school there, and they provide a generous scholarship of in-state tuition to children of graduates, even if they come from a couple of states away. Going to school in the Ozarks as a camping addict is fantastic. You wouldn't believe all the amazing spots there are to pitch a tent and enjoy nature at its purest. The Ozark National Forest, Devil's Den, and just dozens more. America's most obese state is an ironic haven for hikers and campers alike. Jared was kind of our leader. He was the guy that always knew a spot, no matter where we were camping. He had this map, completely tattooed in markings and directions to all the most breathtaking areas. When we went to a new spot, or at least a new spot that was new to him, he would mark it on the map in either green if the spot was good, or red if the spot was shitty. There were marks in other colors as well, different ones, but they are few and far between. He also marks directions to each spot in highlighter. Jared looked the part too, a long-haired granola-styled hippie with a sleeve of tats and a couple of earrings in each ear. But our walking stereotype was the best of the best when it came to camping, and his information was rarely second-hand. So when he burnt up the group message running his mouth about a new spot his cousin found a couple hours south, we all cleared our schedules. I mean, how often were we all new to a location? We all met at our buddy Kyle's house to pack the truck with supplies. Kyle's dad was pretty wealthy, and as a gift for raising his GPA to a 3.0, his father had bought him a brand new F-150 to hopefully keep his academic train rolling. My roommate and I showed up first, along with a cooler full of beer as a peace offering to Kyle for driving. We weren't technically legal, but Allie was only a month or two away and she had a pretty good killer fake, so we rationalized it morally, just as we'd been doing so for years. Austin was next, with his 5-6-person tent and a Sam's Club bulk of beef jerky, and Jared arrived last. Just so you know, we abide by general road trip rules in this truck, Kyle barked, sliding into the front seat and bringing the engine to life. So I don't want to hear a single complaint about my music choice. I snorted. New truck, new rules. I vote we make some amendments. Seriously, I'm not listening to fucking trap the whole ride, Austin laughed. You morons have no appreciation for my tastes. Eventually, we decided on a rotation and pulled out of his driveway to head to Jared's cousin's spot, a place called Creek Bend. Apparently, it wasn't well known enough to be on the entire damn internet, so we navigated there pre-2003 style, the old-fashioned way. The trip went quick, and after 3 hours of listening to Kyle's trap and an assorted mix of alternative, we pulled off the main road and onto a dirt trail somewhere in southern Arkansas. We drove for another half hour or so before the trail abruptly ended. "Oh, this is it all right," Jared chuckled with a smile. "Let's grab the shit and get set up. I don't want to be fumbling with the tent in the dark. We followed Jared through the brush for a bit until we reached a gorgeous clearing. The mountains rose up all around us, and the mid-autumn trees set the world ablaze. The setup didn't take long, and soon we had the tent in perfect shape and a roaring fire. We had been shooting the shit for about an hour or so, enjoying the sunset and roasting hot dogs, when Allie asked the question we had all been wondering. "How did your cousin even find this place?" Allie asked, slipping her beer. Jared shrugged. He didn't really. Max frequents this outdoors Y forum, and he said this guy PM'd him the site with pictures. He wanted to check it out first, but he was busy all weekend and knew we would be all for breaking it in. He took a drink of his own beer. So here we are. I think it's a pretty good spot. Sounds like the plot to a horror flick, Allie laughed. Random stranger gives coordinates to mystery camping location. Austin grinned. Oh, I dare see some psychopath to come take us on. I'd love to see one try with 6 holes in his skull. Jared rolled his eyes. The guy was well known on the site. I think we're good. But nice to know you brought your gun. Austin laughed and reclined, flopping back to gaze at the stars. We decided to turn in a bit later, and we all got ready for bed in the tent. Austin went to take a leak. When he came back, Allie held the zipper shut. "Password," she chimed. "Oh my god, are you in middle school? Just let me in," Austin groaned. "Sorry, rules are rules." "Okay, is the password, 'You're all fucking idiots, let me in, I'm freezing to death'?" he laughed. Allie giggled and threw a look at Jared and Kyle. We all thought they had a thing. "No, that's not it. Try again." We heard Austin shuffle his feet. "This is so stupid," he sighed. "Please." "Come on in," Allie said with a 6th grade smirk. We all slept together when we camped in the fall or winter since it was usually pretty cold. Plus, it was easier to bring one tent rather than 5. It wasn't ever weird or uncomfortable, and Kyle usually generated so much heat it would be worth it even if it were. You know that feeling when you wake up and you're not sure why? Like you can't quite place why you woke up? It's as if you were asleep and then suddenly you just weren't? That's how it was for me, only accompanied with a sense of anxiety. I tossed in my sleeping bag for a moment, before I noticed Austin crouched by the exit of the tent, holding the zipper shut. I screwed my vision against the darkness. "Austin?" "Shh!" he hissed. I crawled over by him, and he looked at me, eyebrows raised. "I think something is outside the tent. Maybe like a bear or something. It woke me up." "Should we wake the others?" I asked. "Nah, he hesitated. "I'm not worried. Did the sound wake you up too?" I shook my head. "Oh well, it brushed up against the tent by my face and that's what woke me up. Thought maybe it had jarred you awake too. It sounded pretty big, like he was interrupted by a shuffling outside the tent." It did sound big. We looked at each other and I kicked the others awake. "What the fuck, guys?" Kyle groaned. Jared shut him and we all listened again. More shuffling. Closer to the tent this time. Austin had his hand on his bag, ready to grab the gun if it was a bear, which seemed pretty unlikely for Arkansas. We had been camping for years and we had never seen a bear. Austin squinted through the mesh. "Guys," he whispered, "I don't think it's a bear." As if in response, whatever was outside moved directly in front of the zipper. Its voice was choppy, garbled, and sounded just like Austin. "Please," it stuttered. "Please, please, 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 please let me in." "Holy shit," Jared whimpered. Austin, even in the dark, paled. More shuffling. "I'm freezing. please let me in. It rasped into Austin's voice. Who's out there? Austin barked, his own voice carrying all the fear he tried to hide. Who's out there? The thing replied. Who's in there? It mimicked Austin's tone for each word, making the sentence improperly meshed together. I said, who is out there? I have a gun. Austin's voice betrayed his terror even more this time. Kyle and I looked at each other, and Allie started to shake. We knew this wasn't a person. I had read all the stories, watched the movies. This wasn't human, whatever it was. Gun, gun, gun. It was like it was trying the word out, like a fucked up learning by phonics lesson. Let me in. I am freezing to death. Please, please, please. It moaned. The voice sounded more together this time, as it got the hang of Austin's voice. Kyle crawled forwards and slammed both his hands on the mesh. No, go away, he shouted, rapid shuffling in place. No, 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 no. It screamed in a butchered version of Kyle. No, please let me in. I'm freezing. Then, the combined voice of dozens of people. I'm starving. Austin choked back a sob and ripped his gun from his pack. No, Jared hissed. Austin, stop, you don't. He fired it through the mesh, emptying the chamber. An otherworldly shriek pierced the stagnant air as the shuffling retreated. To the car, now, Jared hissed. You shouldn't have done that, Austin, he added, unzipping and ducking out the flap. We all followed, blinding, stumbling after Jared, leaving all the stuff behind with whatever the hell was back there. I could hear it giving chase. It broke through the trail somewhere far behind us, awkward gait crashing through the trees and bush. We reached the car, clambering in, most of us crying. I turned in my seat as Kyle revved the engine to life, searching the tree line. It must have been 9 feet tall, skin white as the light that revealed it. Its form was like a distorted human's, an unsettlingly long, thick torso with bony, unnaturally thin limbs protruding it. The legs were short, and I wondered just how it managed to stay standing on such a weak-looking extremities. Its arms were equally thin, but long enough to drag along the ground as it walked. It had human-like hands, 4 fingers and a claw, like thumbnail in place of the digit. Its head was a darkness all its own. It was disproportionate, for one. Its mouth took up most of the entire face, and was filled with teeth of various shapes and sizes. It had no nose, but its eyes glinted, all pupil, in the bright light of the moon. Just under its chin was a large sac, like a tumor or blister. It hung nearly to its shoulders and pulsed with every shriek and moan it gave. Kyle floored the pedal, and we peeled down the trail. It watched as we flew down the road, completely still, and gave one final scream as we disappeared from sight. We were silent the entire ride home. The only sound was Jared's shaking hands as he pulled out the map and drew a purple X through Creek Bend. I still camp sometimes, but only at the visitors area. The 5 of us haven't been out together since. I wonder about Jared's map sometimes. There were other markings on it, more than just red, green, and Creek Bend's purple. Sometimes I wonder what else he's seen. He is a pretty avid camper.